Hey everyone, so I do apologize if you hear any boom booms. Those are going to be notifications and stuff because I'm recording this on my phone. Also, I apologize if you hear a big boom a couple of times. That's my bank declining stuff. So again, I do apologize for that in advance. But now I want to come on here though and talk about something that broke this morning. I didn't talk about it this morning when I should have because, of course, I was focused on giving you guys an update of what's going to be happening this summer, as well as also, giving my take on what topics I think should be discussed for a future Dark Side of the Ring episode, Dark Side of the Ring season, I should say, as well as also working on a video that will premiere next week, which is the first of several that I'm trying to get ahead of because of the summer break season. But with that said, one of the big topics that broke this morning is during, I guess you could say, a stock. Basically, it was during a stock meeting or investors meeting or something. David Zaslav made it known that officially all the rumors and speculations that we have been hearing about will come to pass next year in 2026 around the spring, or at least that's what I heard. And what those rumors that everybody's been speculating and theorizing about is that Warner Brothers Discovery is going to be splitting in two. That's right. It'll be splitting in two starting next year officially. And the way it's being described, I've got it up here on my phone right now, is this is from Discussing Film's Twitter page, X page, if you will, Discussing Film. This is from their Twitter page, X page, if you will. It says, and I quote, "Warner Brothers Discovery is splitting into two companies. Streaming and studios, Warner Brothers Television, Warner Brothers Pictures, WB Games, DC Studios, HBO Max, plus the film and TV libraries. Global networks will be CNN, TNT Sports, Discovery, Discovery Plus, and other TV networks." So yeah, it's two companies. It's the Warner Brothers Streaming and Studios division or company that will be Warner Brothers Warner Brothers Television, Warner Brothers Pictures, WB Games, DC Studios, HBO Max, plus the film and television libraries. That'll be under the Streaming and Studios company. Then the Global Networks company will be CNN, TNT Sports, TBS, Discovery, Discovery Plus, and other TV networks, other ones that are associated with them. Now, what does that mean for, let's say, AEW? Well, All Elite Wrestling would be falling under the Global Television Network, who's going to be run by a different person. David Zaslav is going to be looking over the Streaming and Studios company, or Streaming and Studios portion of WBD, that company. Well, Global Television Networks will be looked over by somebody else. I can't think of that guy's name right now, but that individual, I think his name is George, I believe, will be the one looking over Global Television Network or Global Networks. And now the question is, will this new person in charge of the Global Networks starting next year, will they be in favor of keeping AEW around? That's a good question. Now, a lot of people say we have nothing to worry about right now, and that's true. But I think the one thing we need to understand when it comes down to this is even though we, right now as the public and as fans have nothing to worry about, it doesn't mean that internally as they're prepping for this big change, that those that are going to be in charge of, these companies are going to be part of certain divisions within these companies. There's no saying, right now that they're not, looking at what they could potentially get behind and what they can potentially cut, because they probably are. They're probably in what is called like the pre-planning stages, the pre-blueprint stages, if you will, of figuring out, from the global network perspective, what they can push, what they can cut. The same with streaming and studio, what they can push, what they can cut. And this is supposedly going to help them be more attractive, be more competitive, and all that, and hopefully work out a situation to where they can, where they can basically, where they can work out basically, a faster, I guess you could say again, a more organized way of paying off their debt, which is huge. It's a big debt. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But again, the person that's going to be in charge of the global networks version of WBD, that is, that company, or that CEO for that company, if you will, again, the ball's in his court come next year when it comes to the likes of AEW and any other sports entity they have. I mean, we do know, according to some reports, ESPN has extended their relationship with TNT Sports, and TNT Sports is actually going to be broadcasting starting next year, actually in January, as a matter of fact, in January 2026, they will be broadcasting not just one first-round game like they did last year, but they'll be broadcasting also one semifinal game. That's right, they will get one semifinal game, which could be, and let me look at the bowl schedule right now because I have it with me. It means potentially they could get the Fiesta or the Peach Bowl. Now, historically, believe it or not, back when I was young, back when I was a kid, outside of the Copper Bowl, the Turner Networks used to have, outside of the Copper Bowl, they also used to have the Peach Bowl because it was right there in Atlanta, so it made sense for the Turner Networks, who are housed there, to basically, take the broadcasting rights for the Peach Bowl. So I would not be surprised that if the Fiesta Bowl ends up on ESPN and the Peach Bowl ends up on TNT. So that's potentially what you're looking at as far as the semifinal games in the college football playoff next year or this upcoming January. You'll be looking at the Peach Bowl on like TNT, TBS, and True TV, and you'll be looking at the Fiesta Bowl on ESPN. So that's a win-win for both sides there. But again, they're doing that because obviously they saw the viewership, the high viewership numbers that the first of the 4 first-round games brought in last year, last December. So it makes sense for them to want to increase that viewership even more so. But again, with that said, where does the likes of AEW land when this is official in 2026? Well, contractually, they have a deal. They have a deal with Turner Sports and WBD to continue airing Dynamite and Collision. But here's the thing. This new CEO, again, I think his first name is George or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. This new CEO might say, hey, Dynamite's doing good, but Collision isn't, and they might decide, let's get rid of Collision. Excuse me. They might decide to do that altogether. And if that happens, then Dynamite will be the only show. There would be no more Collision. Or if he feels like both Collision and Dynamite are not bringing in the numbers they need to, then, and combined with some of the recent revelations of what the numbers are on Max, on HBO Max, then honestly you can't blame them if they decide, yeah, Tony, we're not going to renew your contract with us, so you're going to have to find a new home. That's not going to be a good sign for AEW, because even if that happens, not saying it will, but if it happens, Tony's going to have a hard time shopping around to a new network to try to get both Dynamite and maybe Collision put on that network. Could he go to USA? Yeah, but USA has WWE on Friday nights. That's going to be a bit of a trick. That would be kind of tricky. Could he go to Paramount? Yes. Could he go to Vice? Yes. People got Paramount. He could go there. Going to go to Vice? Hey, Vice has women's of wrestling. They could go there. And I think a lot of people have Vice. I'm not really saying they do. But there would be a lot of there would be options but they'd be very little. They'd be very little. And what could that mean? That could mean that if Tony Khan wants to keep AEW afloat, then he's going to have to really change up things within the next year or so. He's going to have to do a lot of changing to impress the new CEO or the new incoming CEO for this global networks division, which AEW will be, associated with because their shows are aired on their networks, TBS and TNT. He's going to have to really take that ball and finally just run with it and do what needs to be done to get people's attention to basically convince this guy, hey, Dynamite and Collision all worth keeping around. So if I'm Tony Khan, I got 4 hours, in 2 nights, 4 hours in 2 nights. I would use those 4 hours of Super Blockbuster, I think that's what they're calling the show, to really just, turn the page and say, hey, George, and again, I think that's the guy's name who's going to be the one in charge of the global networks and all that. Just turn the page and say, hey, George, look, this is what AEW is. This is what attracted David to sign the contract with us. Look, we're immense. We're hitting the ball out of the ballpark and all that. So, he's going to have to really turn it up. He's going to have to really bring, AEW back to what, attracted people to it, attracted Turner Sports, WBD, to it. So he's going to have to really turn it up, because if not, this guy that's going to take over the global networks, this guy could say viewerships are not good, viewership numbers not good, ratings are not good, viewership on Max is not good. Guess what? Bye-bye. And that could be a bad sign. That could be a bad sign for AEW. And I can tell you a lot of the talent, a lot of the talent, they're going to look at that and they're going to be thinking to themselves, and I'm sure a lot of them have heard about it by now. A lot of them are going to be like, okay, what do we do here? What's our next move? If we don't have AEW, well, there's TNA, of course. There's TNA, but there's also MLW, there's Japan, true, there's CMLL, there's AAA, AAA, but again, the talent has got to really just hope and pray Tony just finally wakes up and realizes, hey, I got to get this company back to what it was originally, because if not, a lot of those talents might have no choice but to sign with the WWE. And a lot of them that are there came from WWE. And the last thing they want to do, if they truly feel this way, the last thing they want to do is go back to WWE, and potentially be put back in the position they were in before, or hopefully be put in a better position. We'll have to see. But it's not just AEW that, potentially has to worry about things. There's a lot of shows. Because, again, there's a whole bunch of networks, Discovery Plus, TNT, TNT as a whole, TBS as a whole, all the other networks, CNN. All these networks have shows, they have people that work at these shows, they have people that work behind the scenes. A lot of these people are going to be wondering once the dust is settled next year, and this is made official, they're going to be wondering what's next for us. Are we going to be on the chopping block? Are our shows going to be taken off the air? Are we going to be released? They're going to be wondering this stuff, and I'm sure they're wondering it right now. Depending on what direction things are going to go in. But it's not just the global networks as well. Like I said, David Zaslav is going to be overseeing the streaming and studios portion, which is Warner Brothers Pictures, Warner Brothers Television, WB, WB Games, HBO Max, and all the, shows and film libraries. And, you got to wonder, okay, what does that mean for DC? Well, obviously DC is going to still be a focal point in everything. James Gunn is still going to retain control over that, but he's going to have to report to David Zaslav to get final approval. That's the only obstacle. But it sounds like Zaslav trusts Gunn enough to where I don't think Gunn's going to have to do that as much. He's just going to have to say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing and everything, and just letting you know. And if you want to let me know that if you want to let me know if there's things you feel need to be changed, let me know." I'm sure it's that kind of relationship with Zaslav. It's like, do what you got to do to make money out of this, to make this a success. And I think that's all that's really happening. And that the only time Zaslav would have to step in is if maybe at a screening or so, the people that invest in the movie, and let me get some coffee here for a second. People that invest in the movie, they might be like, "Yeah, David, we don't like this. Can you tell Gunn to change this and change that?" And that'd be the only time. Now, as far as everything else goes, that's up in the air. That's up in the air. Warner Brothers Television, I think animation also falls under Zaslav's. I think the animation also falls under Zaslav as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what he keeps around. For the streaming and studios company, streaming and studios company portion of this of WBD, because overall there's still going to be the WBD. There's still going to be Warner Brothers Discovery, but they're going to be presented as separate companies. You're going to have the Warner Brothers Discovery's Global Network Company, and you can have the Warner Brothers Discovery Streaming and Studios Company, and that's it. And they're both going to be publicly traded and all that. So, they'll be looked at as different entities, but they'll still be under the WBD banner. And from what it sounds like, David Zaslav, even though he will be the CEO, he will overlook just the streaming and studios portion. From what it's also understood, he's also going to have final say over everything. Like basically the CEO of the global networks, like if he hears about an idea for a show or something they could do to increase viewership and everything like that, he might be okay with it, but then he might be like, well, yeah, I'm gonna sign off on it. I'm gonna make it official, but I'm also gonna double check with the guy that overall sees everything, and that's Zaslav. In other words, the CEO of the global networks will be just like James Gunn, except the difference is he'll be able to have final say and not have to really report to Zaslav or contact Zaslav as much, as James Gunn or anybody else will, under the streaming and studios platform. But basically, yeah, David Zaslav is going to look over the streaming and studios portion, and just like with the person looking over the global networks portion, he's going to decide what to move forward with, what to potentially cut, behind the scenes and office-wise, who to, put in certain positions, who to cut there. It's going to be really interesting, and there's a lot of people, and that are working on projects right now, that are going to fall under the streaming and studios umbrella, and the projects, like I said earlier, that are going to fall under the global networks umbrella. People are going to wonder, okay, is our idea, going to be able to move forward, and are we going to be able to move forward with it? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, even the future of Looney Tunes is going to be more in doubt as we go on. But it sounds like if, David Zaslav's in charge of the streaming and studios portion, which includes DC Studio, includes Warner Brothers Animation, if he's in charge of that, then obviously with like Looney Tunes and maybe some DC properties, he's not just going to rely on them being made in-house and being featured on HBO Max and all that. He's going to also want to license them out so they can make some money off it in a deal with, let's say, Netflix and Prime Video and Apple TV and so on, so that way they can, more than quickly, pay off their debt, if you know what I mean. But we'll see what they do. We'll see what they have planned and everything going forward. But yeah, it's official. Come 2026, basically a year from now, maybe earlier, but spring 2026, it feels like, it's going to happen unless something changes. All signs are pointing to WBD splitting in two, with one company being the global network company for WBD focusing on the television networks and all that, like TNT, CNN, TBS, Discovery, Discovery Plus, and so on. Well, the other one will be focused on streaming and studios, which will cover Warner Brothers Pictures, Warner Brothers Television, Warner Brothers Animation, DC Studios, and so on. Everything that follows under that category. But yeah, it's gonna, unless something happens, to change the trajectory. This is going to be made official come next year in 2026. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment down below, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, click on the links in the description to help me out elsewhere outside of YouTube. But give me your thoughts on this, guys. What do you think is going to happen when this occurs, unless there is a change before then? We still have a little less than a year, just a little less than a year, or a little under a year, whatever you want to call it, or however you want to look at it, before this becomes official. What do you think will be the future for all the things I've mentioned? Or do you think we might have a change, in trajectory as we get closer, and this may not become something that becomes reality? Let me know. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you on it, guys. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you on it. And until next time, I will talk to you later, but give me your thoughts on the whole situation of WBD going in two separate studio directions that are still under the WBD banner, but are going by the company category or names, or I guess right now they're just work in progress names, streaming and studios and global networks. Let me know what your thoughts are, guys, and until next time, I'll talk to you all later.